Experts Danny Kanell and Ryan Wilson. Danny, you heard Sean Payton speak for about 40 minutes or so. What was your takeaway from that?
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was enlightening. I thought it was refreshing, the honesty, just talking about the process, the people that he called, kind of what's on his mind. I think it's refreshing that he said he didn't try to be coy about it. He said, I might coach again. Like, he didn't try to, we've seen other coaches retire and they don't want to force their hand. So I'm not going to coach again. And then we see him back. I think this is a smart man making a smart decision. I mean, he's still young, but this team is not in a very good spot right now with the salary cap. They're in a bad situation. There's quarterback questions. And I think it's the perfect time for Sean Payton to step away, catch his breath. He kind of alluded to TV, which he said there aren't any official offers, but maybe he just drove up the price because they're watching this. I think he comes back. I think he probably takes a year or two off, and then he's back and he takes his pick because there's only 32 jobs, but this is one of the guys that can step aside, and anytime he wants another job, it'll be waiting for him.
You know what's funny, Danny? When he started the press conference, the way he was talking and thanking everyone and hugging Gail Benson, the owner, it felt like he was going to announce his retirement. But later he said, of course, he doesn't know what the future holds for him. So that left open the door, as you talk about, for him to return whenever that should happen. But I was wondering, for the first 15 minutes or so, was this going to be it for Sean Payton? He talked about spending more time with family. He talked about the grind of what it takes to be an NFL head coach, the 90 to 100-hour work weeks, having time to travel, having time to get in shape, all those things you're not allowed to do. You don't have the time to do when you're an NFL head coach, unless maybe you're Steve Spurrier, who found time to do those things. But I think it just points to looking behind the curtain, what we often don't see, the downside, if you want to call that, the grind that is being an NFL head coach. We see all the sidelines, the celebrations, what it takes to win football games. But getting to that point, we don't often get to view behind the curtain in that sense. So I applaud Sean Payton. And he said this isn't something that he just thought about over the last few weeks, because he had mentioned to Gail Benson that he needed some time. And she said, take all the time you need. But he said back in training camp, he had thoughts about whether this was going to be a situation, could he give it his all? And so perhaps that doesn't necessarily point to the concerns with the long-term concerns with the quarterback or the salary cap issues, but certainly those are to the fore now, and then those are going to be something that the team's going to have to deal with now without Sean Payton.
Where does this job rank? I asked Pete Prisco that earlier, and he said it ranks near the bottom of the list of the 9 openings right now, if you include the Raiders. And Jonathan Jones is on the other end of the spectrum. He thinks this ranks near the top, but when you look at where they are cap-wise, $71 million over the cap. That's about twice as much as anybody else in the league. Where they are with the quarterback situation. Danny, where would you rank this job?
I know this is such a cop-out. It's not what we want to hear on, when we're doing this type of stuff, giving opinions. I think it's like a middle-of-the-pack type of job. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's like getting the New York Giants or a team in Los Angeles or the Dallas Cowboys, who are probably a premium job in all of sports. But I don't think it's the worst either. And I think that's a tribute to Sean Payton, because I think if you would have asked this before his tenure started, we might have been looking at it as a lower tier job, one of the worst ones. But I think there's a couple things that I don't think it's as attractive right now. One, because he set a standard of excellence and he had a Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe one of the best to ever do it with him, in Drew Brees, who helped build it up. You never want to be the guy that follows the guy. Like, this will be a tough job for whoever takes it because of that. Then you look at the salary cap issues, the questions at quarterback. I think it makes it really tough now. But as far as like things that I think make it attractive, fan bases. I mean, this is one of the most rabid fan bases that are out there. They play in a portion of the country where they love their football. They're gonna come. They're gonna be rabid. They're gonna be loud. There's a great home field advantage. I used to play there when I was at the Atlanta Falcons. That place gets ruckus. They are loud, and they'll let you know about it. So I know it's kind of a cop out here, Chris, but I think it's like a middle tier NFL job. I don't think it's one of the top 5, but I don't think it's one of the bottom 5 either.
Exactly right. That Sean Payton made that job attractive, because prior to that, there wasn't a lot to love about the way the Saints played historically. So a couple things you have to think about here. Number one, is Tom Brady retiring? Because that could help the attractiveness of this Saints job, number one. Number two, how concerned are you about the minus $71 million on the cap there in terms of being in the red? How much do you trust Mickey Loomis to get you out of that number? And he's been really good at kicking the can down the road, as we like to say, and they can continue to do that. The issue becomes, though, if you kick the can down the road, as Danny notes, you don't have a franchise quarterback, there's going to be some holes on offense. There are going to be players you're going to have to re-sign, Mike Thomas being key among them, should he even want to be there. And the other thing is you're going to be wasting a really good defense. So there are a lot of factors to weigh. And I think it's an attractive job if you can convince yourself that you can get out of the salary cap situation. Because if Tom Brady's not there in Tampa Bay, the division remains wide open. And I know Danny's talking up Jameis Winston as being a potential quarterback that teams should look at this offseason once he gets healthy. And maybe the Saints want to look at him as well because we know what he can do there. And he certainly played much better there than he had at Tampa Bay. And the infrastructure is in place. And we heard Sean Payton talk about that throughout his press conference. So I like the situation in New Orleans a little better than Danny. I would put it in the top third of attractive jobs. But again, that assumes that Mickey Loomis, you can trust him to make sure the salary cap issues magically go away.
Jameis Winston, a free agent. Taysom Hill, jury way out on him as a quarterback. Maybe the jury's already in after what we saw this season. Him not really getting much of a chance, and I think that kind of tells us what we need to know because Sean Payton certainly knows. Ryan, they have the 18th pick in the draft coming up this season. Do they go with a quarterback here, you think?
It certainly makes sense. The unfortunate downside to all this is that Sean Payton will not be there to coach that quarterback up. I have them taking Kenny Pickett, who's 24 years old, so he's experienced by quarterback standards and coming out of college. So that certainly would help the transition. But again, who is going to be calling plays? Dennis Allen, should he get the job, is a defensive guy, and you would have to sort all those things out. The offensive line is really good, but the lack of skill position players could be a concern beyond basically Alvin Kamara if Mike Thomas decides that he wants to do something else. You also have the benefit of that defense, which could also help you. So perhaps, if you squint, it looks a little bit like the Mac Jones New England Patriots situation, but there are going to be a lot of variables to sort out, especially if Tom Brady returns. But I think if Tom Brady leaves and you want to get a quarterback, because as you point out, you're not sold on Taysom Hill, you're not sold on Ian Book, who struggled in his one start, unsurprisingly, and Jameis Winston goes elsewhere, then you're really going to be up against it. So quarterback is probably going to be at the top of the do list, and it'll be a cheap quarterback contract, especially given their salary cap situation as we sit here.
So the jury's in on Taysom Hill. He is not a franchise quarterback. He's not somebody you would want to build around, and I don't think the next coach of the New Orleans Saints would be comfortable with that. It's just a style of play. He's not a franchise quarterback. I mean, he was a gadget player, and that's what Sean Payton created. I think a lot of this depends on what you do with Jameis Winston. If you could get him to sign a cap-friendly deal, which coming off an ACL injury and still some uncertainty with his future, I think maybe you could convince him to do that, to have some stability in his career. I still think, I'd be curious to know what Ryan thinks of this too. I think Jameis Winston on a cap-friendly deal is a better option than Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, Malik Willis, Carson Strong, whatever quarterback you took from this year's draft, because I feel like at least you know what the floor is with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, who's a little bit rocky, still can throw you 30, 35 touchdown passes. Now, you might get the interceptions with you. And some of these younger quarterbacks, a rookie, I just don't know. You could see some incredible busts. I think there's a pretty high risk of bust in some of these quarterbacks. So I would rather see him move forward with Jameis Winston. But that, I think, is priority number one for the new coach, and what they're going to do, Mickey Loomis is going to do for the future, is figuring out the quarterback, and then everything else has to fall into place. All
right, Danny Kanell, Ryan Wilson with us here. Sean Payton stepping down as Saints head coach with 3 years remaining on his contract, says he is not going to coach next season, but might coach again. Only 58 years old, so still plenty young enough to be a head coach or a coach of any line of work. Daily NFL Fix. Will Brinson, Pick Six podcast is where it's at. They already have an emergency episode up on the Saints now needing a new head coach and Sean Payton potentially landing elsewhere.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.